disseminated intravascular coagulation, as one who said it's a nightmare. And that's a pathologic disruption of finely balanced forces of hemostasis. Normally, in the body, blood is maintained in a fluid state by a fine balance between the coagulation system, the anticoagulants, and the fibrinolytic system. And in DIC, what happens is systemic activation of blood coagulation, and there will be deposition of fibrin and formation of microvascular thrombi throughout the body. And because of that, there will be depletion of platelets and clotting factors, and activation of the plasmin leading to fibrinolysis, hemorrhage, and multi-organ dysfunction. When it comes to prevalence, in the general population, the prevalence is only 0.03%, vary from 0.02 to 0.07%. But in certain situations like amniotic fluid embolism, it can be as high as 22 to 83%. And in HELLP syndrome, it can be as high as 21%. And the mortality because of DIC is estimated to be 6 to 24%. That's why it's a nightmare for the obstetrician. And coming to pathophysiology, normal pregnancy is a prothrombotic state. There's a nature's mechanism to arrest the hemorrhage after delivery. There will be marked increase in the coagulation factors 1, 7, 8, 9, and 10, plasminogen levels, and plasminogen activator inhibitor 1 and 2. Impaired endogenous anticoagulation, and there will be decrease in protein C, protein S, and protein Z levels. And there will be impaired fibrinolysis, and of course, platelet reactivity also increases. Let us review the coagulation cascade. The coagulation starts by the intrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway. And in the extrinsic pathway, it is tissue factor which comes into play, which activates factor 7 to factor 7A, and then the activated factor 7 activates factor 10, and then the prothrombin will be converted to thrombin. Thrombin converts fibrinogen to fibrin, and fibrin polymer, and fibrin clot. In the intrinsic pathway, when there is a exposure of the blood to outside, or there is collagen exposure, there will be activation of the factor 12, which activates factor 11, and then factor 9, and then factor 8, and that converts prothrombin to thrombin. The thing is, in extrinsic pathway, it is the tissue factor that comes into play in DIC and obstetrics. And in extrinsic pathway, if when thrombin is formed, the thrombin activates the intrinsic pathway as well. That is why uncontrolled thrombosis occurs. And DIC is not a disease by itself, but it is a manifestation of underlying several conditions. And the commonest being preeclampsia and eclampsia, HELLP syndrome, endothelial damage, releases tissue factor. And in hemorrhage and shock also, there will be endothelial damage, there will be release of tissue factor, and reduced natural anticoagulants clearance, and reduced temperature of tissues. Hypothermia is very important. And in sepsis, there will be pro-inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 1 and interleukin 6, and there will be exaggerated activation of tissue factor and reduced clearance of natural anticoagulants, which lead to coagulation failure. And clinical findings, there will be a latent and compensated phase where the activation of the coagulation will not produce any obvious clinical symptoms or signs, but it can be normalized if we can be diagnosed early by some means, which I will come to later. In overt DIC, features of overt bleeding and thrombosis occurs. The patient will have oozing from IV sites, mucosa, hematuria, and if it is HELLP syndrome, it can be hepatic failure, hepatic rupture, and intra-abdominal massive bleeding. There will be signs of shock, tachycardia, hypotension if it is acute, weak peripheral pulses, altered mental status, and cold extremities. And finally, organ dysfunction. It is because of organ dysfunction, you can go in for renal failure, hepatic failure, ARDS, acute lung injury, and neurological dysfunction. And it is this organ dysfunction that you have to prevent when you, if you improve reduce the maternal mortality due to DIC. Lab findings should be interpreted in the context of normal values in pregnancy, because in normal pregnancy, the values can be different. Thrombocytopenia, normal value is 1.5 lakhs in pregnancy, and prolonged PT, which evaluates the extrinsic pathway, and prolonged APDT evaluating the intrinsic pathway. Both are prolonged in DIC, but in normal pregnancy, they are slightly lower. So when you interpret the values, you should keep in mind that even if the abnormal value comes within the normal range, it should be taken seriously. A widening difference between baseline and repeat test. We have to do the repeat test of PT and APDT when you are managing DIC, and a widening difference indicates the patient is going for worsening. Hypofibrinogenemia. Fibrinogen is very important, including And normally in pregnancy, there will be increase in fibrinogen level. And if the fibrinogen level is less than 200 milligram%, that predicts severe PPH. When the APTT and PT are prolonged, the fibrinogen level would be less than 100 milligram%. So APTT and PT will be prolonged in the late stages only. There will be increased D-dimer in normal pregnancy. We cannot depend on D-dimer to diagnose DIC. WBC levels may be normal, increased or decreased. If he is in sepsis, it can be increased or decreased. So evaluation management should be simultaneous. You start managing when you find that she has bleeding from puncture sites, etc., and she has profuse hemorrhage. You manage simultaneously along with the lab tests. CBC, platelet count, APTT, serum creatinine, NLFT, to see whether she's going for renal failure or hepatic failure. Blood and urine culture in a subacute case where you are suspecting sepsis. Prior to getting first set of laboratory studies, a bedside clotting time can be done with 5 ml blood in a red top tube and wait for 8 to 10 minutes. And you shake every 30 seconds and you find. It's a crude test, not validated in pregnancy, but it's useful. In less fulminant cases, coagulation studies should be repeated. Serial testing of fibrinogen and coagulation factors is important in the timely management. So when it comes to management, it's a major challenge because in management, we don't know whether she has a fibrinolytic system that is more active, with a coagulation system which is more active, and always in management, this resuscitation should be simultaneous with the management. And the management of the original, the basic conditions should also be taken care of. And very important is to notify the anesthesia staff, transfusion service, and the laboratory service. And it's better to take the patient to theater because you have the anesthetist to help you in resuscitating the patient. And the patient's oxygen saturation is less than 90, it's better to intubate and ventilate because that's very, very important in preventing organ damage. IV access to large IV cannulas start crystalloids before blood arrives, but you should not be giving crystalloids throughout because that will dilute the coagulation factors and she'll go for more bleeding. As early as possible, blood should be transfused. And your aim should be to make the systolic blood pressure more than 90 millimeters mercury, mean arterial pressure more than 65, urine output more than 0.5 ml per kg per hour. And in measures to reduce massive hemorrhage, which I have been already exhaustively discussed, should be resorted to. And PRBC, FFP, and platelet ratio 1:1:1 because all the trauma units recommend this ratio. Large volumes of crystalloids, as I said already, will dilute the coagulation factors and promote more bleeding. So as early as possible, PET products should be started. Massive transfusion protocol should be started. Ensure adequate tissue perfusion for preventing combination of acidosis, coagulopathy, hypothermia, electrolyte abnormalities. All these are lethal to the heart, lethal and harmful to the heart. So that should be avoided. And that is why I'm telling about this intubation ventilation if she needs. Signs of hemodynamic instability are systolic BP less than 100, pulse rate more than 100, increased respiratory rate more than 23, urine output less than 30 ml per hour, and cold clammy skin, altered mentation. So that summarizes the management of the lethal cause. And we should be careful, arterial pH should be monitored, acidosis should be diagnosed and treated, and electrolyte imbalance because calcium can be deficient, so we have to give calcium gluconate IV, and there can be hyperkalemia if you're transfusing a lot of pack cells, more than 4 units of pack cells, then potassium has to be brought down, and circulatory checks and reports and blood loss should be assessed every 15 minutes and supplemented, and early use of blood products as I already emphasized, and thromboelastogram and rotational thromboelastogram is used by the trauma people as well as the transplant surgeons. And it's important to, the advantage of thromboelastogram is we can have a global assessment of the coagulation system and which particular component is deficient so that we can reduce the number of blood products transfused, which products which are necessary need be transfused. They can be assessed by TEG and ROTEM. Hypothermia, it's very, very important to make the patient warm. Hypothermia is detrimental to cardiac function. So hypothermia should be prevented by active warming It can be a bear hugger, or you have to bomb all the fluids which is being transfused. And hypothermia can cause myocardial ischemia and promote coagulopathy. Avoid hypothermia and acidosis by using blankets, warming devices, and warm IV fluids. Manage electrolyte imbalance, hypocalcemia, 1 to 2 gram of calcium gluconate, IV over 2 to 3 minutes for every 4 units of RBC transfuse. There is no time for you to measure the ionized calcium level. So if you are giving 4 units of PRBC, you give 1 gram of calcium gluconate IV over 2 to 3 minutes. Hyperkalemia can result in rapid transfusion of large volumes of PRBC. That can be tackled by giving 10% dextrose and 10 units of regular insulin. And of course, tranexamic acid will reduce bleeding even if there is DIC. So that stresses the importance of blood products, and that's a bomber and calcium. Maintain oxygen saturation to more than 95%, if not possible, mechanical ventilation. Fibrinogen less than 200 milligram % indication for cryoprecipitate. Even if FFP contains fibrinogen, it will not be that high to tackle the fibrinogen deficiency. So if it is less than 200 milligram %, cryoprecipitate is needed. If the fibrinogen is less than 100 milligram %, she might need some 10 units of cryoprecipitate. So thromboelastography is coming up. It's not validated in obstetric hemorrhage, but there are centers using it. It gives a global assessment of hemostatic function and allows more rapid diagnosis and intervention in patients who develop DIC. Peripart of hysterectomy. It should be initiated earlier than later, because otherwise you lose the patient. Don't go for the internal leg ligation, etc., because dissection encounters bleeding. It is desirable but not always possible to correct coagulopathies prior to surgery. Simultaneously correcting coagulopathy, you do the hysterectomy. If bleeding persists after the resuscitative measure, their prompt decision should be taken for hysterectomy. You need not waver. To conclude, DIC typically occurs as a complication of the underlying disease, and diagnosis of DIC is made in the clinical setting of bleeding from puncture sites, IV sites, and massive obstetrical hemorrhage. And laboratory evidence of thrombocytopenia and abnormal coagulation factors, PT, FETT, D-dimer, and fibrinogen. Only in subacute cases. Whereas if you send the blood for PT and FETT, by the time it comes, you would have corrected the coagulation failure. Thromboelastography is coming up to diagnose early evidence of coagulation. So in the early stage, if you do thromboelastography, you can diagnose and treat, so that you will not go for full-fledged DIC. Acute DIC should be anticipated when the patient is in shock due to PPH, preeclampsia, eclampsia, HELLP syndrome, and sepsis. Management is treatment of underlying condition, which I already mentioned. Provide supportive care, administer blood products, and don't delay blood products administration, and simultaneously take care of hypothermia, acidosis, and electrolyte imbalance. It's very, very important to take care of these lethal quad. If bleeding continues, hysterectomy should be decided and executed without delay. So that we have happy moms and happy babies. And when it comes to management of DIC, time is life. So you should not take time, you should not waste time in managing DIC. Thank you.